We're live. Amazing. Well, this is a bit different to John and I sitting in the little studio. We are at Specialized HQ in Chessington in the UK, and I'm with DA, who is, what's your job title? Head of
Turbo in the UK, or category lead Turbo.
So you deal with all mountain bikes, road bikes, all the turbo?
All the turbo, yeah, all things turbo. So from our performance mountain range, active range of bikes, so the sort of city bikes you might refer to them as well, and road bike as well, which is a recent addition to our family of turbo.
What's your turbo bike of choice?
Oh, my turbo bike of choice. Might be a little bit controversial because it's an EMTB forums group here, but
it's got to be an MTB, an EMTB.
Well, it would have been up until about a week ago, my Livo, but it's now a Livo SL for me personally, and we'll explain why that is, okay, going forward. But I do have a Creo as well. That's my commute weapon, and that is pretty astounding.
So it's a pretty special bike, the SL. Who's it for? Who would you say the SL is for? What type of rider? Everyone, or?
Not necessarily, no. And I think if we were to have like a power cut now, and the one thing you take away from this is that it is a standalone platform. It is an all new type of turbo. You know, there is a point to that tagline SL on there. We have a full power, full size motor, full battery, if you like, in our Kinivo and our Livo platform. So full turbo, if you like. And then Turbo SL is a different take on things. So it may share the namesake with Livo, but it could be, dare I say it, an N+1. There could be the rider out there who has Livo, also wants Livo SL, or indeed this is potentially, the way I look at it, more likely the rider who hasn't jumped into EMTB yet. Maybe they're not convinced by having a heavier bike, and that's where the SL will come in due to its significantly lightweight, as you know. So we refer to this type of platform as light and nimble. Two words you don't often associate with EMTBs, whereas of course our Livo, our full power Livo if you like, that's considered powerful and planted. Any of you who've ridden an EMTB bike in the room, pretty much everyone, I expect, knows how you can really boss the bike through pretty much any kind of terrain. Bikes that don't have the motor or the battery, they tend to be a little bit more lightweight, and you have to be a bit more considered with them. You have to maybe have enhanced bike handling skills as well. So this could appeal to that type of authentic rider.
I've got to say, it does feel remarkably different. I thought when I saw it on paper, I didn't really think that 5 kilos or whatever that weight difference is would make such a significant difference. But
on the trail,
yeah, it feels so different. What do you guys think? You've had a look at it, picked it up. It's a pretty cool product. It's opening up new market segments, I guess, for Specialized as well, which is cool. So has anyone got? I mean, this is like an open forum with. I've got so many questions that people have sent through, but who's got any questions in the audience that they want answered by the head of Turbo just here? And if you're watching online, send some questions on the live chat, because we've got Andrew who's going to read out your questions live. So hopefully we can get those answered. So do you guys have anything that you want to know about the bike, or have a Livo at the moment, or a Kinivo, and want to ask DA a question about it? And it can be anything. Like the invite literally said no holds barred. So fill your boots.
Will we ever get offered frame only?
Will we ever get a frame only is the question. Would you like a frame only?
Yeah.
How many of you in the room would like a frame only?
Frame motor and battery. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Well, 50%.
Good point, actually, and you sort of made the distinction yourself. So naturally, it has to have the system within it, whether it's an SL system or it's a turbo system. Because frame only without those parts, it would be a little left wanting, I would say. I mean, maybe we could leave the cranks off, and there are other manufacturers of those. But otherwise, it's a consideration. We know a lot of stores out there who do some really great custom build business. And they would take maybe the colour of a Comp Carbon or an Expert and then almost strip and rebuild. So that's where we've seen quite a lot of people doing that already. The option of a frame only, or frame with motor system in it, is potentially out there, but it's interesting to get your guys' feedback on that.
There was an S-Works full fat Livo. I don't know if that's the right term for it, but
Yeah, I mean, it's all fair, isn't it? We talk about full fat or the bikes that don't have motors and batteries, whether it's full muscle or acoustic or analog or those kinds of things. So the sort of affectionate terms for them. Yeah, there was an S-Works,
but not many
frame.
in the UK, from what I understood or read.
None.
Okay,
none. We didn't actually bring them in
Okay.
as a choice, partly because of the feedback from our network to say that they're doing the business with bikes that they strip and rebuild. But it's interesting to get the question because it shows it's a consideration. One of the things is pricing on frame or frame with motor system and making it the right kind of value versus the bike. 9 times out of 10, the full bike will be better value than if you were to buy the frame only and then build it to the same specification. So having the options is great, but if we brought it in and then it sat there, that's not so hot.
I've got something that somebody sent me, and they said, I bought a Livo 6 months ago, and told my wife, I'm done buying bikes for years. Was that a mistake?
I think any time you tell your wife that is probably a mistake. The old adage of N+1. And that's where something like SL can really come in. I mean, I alluded to it earlier and talking about the authentic rider. The reason why this system, and when I talk about the system, I mean the motor, the battery, and what we refer to as our Turbo Connect unit, or the TCU, which sits on the top tube. It debuted in the road bike, our Kinivo SL, last year when it was first launched. And the emphasis on this system is not about making it lighter. That's a byproduct. The reason why we built this system is because there was a lot of people out there, yourselves, ourselves included, who rode either Livos or Kinivos already and were only riding them on a very low support level. Using mission control, we'd dial our support down. We'd never get through a 700 watt hour battery or even a 500 watt hour battery in a ride or even in multiple rides. And so the idea came about of making a motor that would be less powerful compared to what we already had. So it was actively considered that there are a lot of riders out there who want to use, their heart, their lungs, their legs a little bit more, and therefore they wanted a motor for a bit of the assistance on the uphill, still the power to ride more trails, but they still wanted to put in a lot more emphasis from themselves. So the motor itself runs a much lower power setting than on our full fat or full power turbo. So turbo has a peak power that's significantly higher. Peak power can go up to about 560 watts on a Livo, on that motor system, whereas this is set at 240. Nominal power and peak power at 240 on an SL system. And that's lesser Newton meters as well in terms of force, so delivering it to the rear wheel. Byproduct of that again is we get to couple a smaller battery to it, lighter weight. So it really is a consideration for someone who wants to use their legs more. Less powerful motor, we get it much, much lighter. So it made sense to debut it in a road bike, and now it's come to a mountain bike. As you know from Rob's video, it's like light years away from the weight of most other e-mountain bikes. So in short, yeah, he made a big mistake.
Thought so.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe this is from the same guy, but he's interested in the range extender and asking if he can get a relationship extender with it as well.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we do shorten it to the RE, so yeah, it could work for both. Or maybe that could be a stocking filler.
Sounds good.
Yeah, put that on the list for next year.
Add it as an option.
Yeah.
Have we got much stuff come through on the live?
Can everyone hear me on this mic, by the way? Can you hear us? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just wondered if I was talking to the abyss. But,
I'm just amazed this all works.
Yeah,
We
it's
kind of
amazing,
put this
isn't
all
it?
together.
We got a question from Paul Griffiths. If Valentino Rossi had an electric bike, would he have the SL? Let me know. Cheers.
I mean, he's pretty fast anyway, isn't he? Would he have the SL? Yeah, I'm sure he would.
Those guys tend to be pretty fit, don't they? Whether it's Superbike or Formula One. Considering, and we've done, anecdotally, we've done bike fits on some of the Formula One drivers from McLaren and various other teams. And even though they sit in a car and that's their living, they are unbelievably fit and athletic or everywhere else. Hence, the sort of triathlons and everything else they get into. So I would imagine, given they've got the legs and the lungs for it, they'd probably go SL.
There's a lot of athletes that train, isn't there, using electric mountain bikes. A lot of regular mountain bike riders we know that go out in the winter and the off season and train using an EMTB. So
yeah, it's quite from a numbers perspective. I've got a colleague in the States who used a Kinivo SL as his training bike for an Ironman. So, almost completely different languages you might assume, but the beauty of using the e-bike was tracking the numbers. And through mission control, he could look at exactly what was being done in terms of his power input to the ride and the bike's power input as well. So tracking that and almost limiting the amount of support he was getting, therefore he could go out on a training block and use it as a real performance bike and not just a bike to assist him on all the hills. He could actually make it harder for himself. So yeah, from a performance perspective, there's definitely, and training, winter training, it's got a lot of mileage from that side of things.
there was quite a few questions that came through regarding like warranty and reliability that people are really interested in. They invest a lot of money in the bikes and love to ride them. But when it goes wrong, it sucks. I'm sure a lot of people have had situations where they've been not able to ride. The motors, there's quite a few people that have got some feedback around the motors and the reliability and the amount that they've had to change. What do you guys see as an acceptable level of failure, or should there be any failure? And some riders have had maybe 1, 2, 3 different motors. Is there any comment that you wanted to add around that kind of stuff?
I would say certainly there's, with any product, be it electrical, be it mechanical, there is always some level of failure. And I think everybody's fairly understanding of that, and we do appreciate the understanding. There is a point where it gets beyond acceptable. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a percentage for it, say in motors. We certainly, every single case is handled by our rider care team via the retailer, your local retailer, to make sure that we do the utmost possible, whether it's replacing motors, whether it's batteries, whether it's main harnesses, whether it's TCU, so any part of the turbo system. Just like back in the day, it might have been our own brand of suspension, or even when once upon a time there was a lot of talk about FSR, you know, our proprietary 4-bar linkage system, being less capable of dealing with the winter than a single pivot full suspension bike. Yeah, I mean, true, there are definitely things that require a bit more attention than others. I think education is an important part to that, and not just educating our retailers, which we do quite a lot of, but educating the rider as well. Quite a lot of retailers, you happen to know one very local to yourself, make their own videos, communicate, sort of supporting the platform. I used to remember we had a video when we were talking about high-end product, particularly say equivalent to S-Works, and the suggestion that because it's cost so much money, it will last longer. Actually, if you take that to the nth degree, like a Formula One car or a superbike, as we've been talking about earlier, they actually require the utmost attention to keep them rolling. You know, an 8-speed chain and cassette is going to last you longer than a 12-speed one, for instance. But we certainly wouldn't ever want to shy away from supporting the rider. That's our main thing. If you go into your store, you have an issue, it's trying to turn around that potential problem as soon as possible and equipping our retailers with that capability.
It's interesting to see the new motor on the SL. They've put a lot more work into water sealing. It's even got a Gore-Tex
membrane.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly, of course, I mean that's kind of inside the motor. The other things that we've learned and taken on board, you know, a lot of the stuff from our full fat turbo product, be it from the active bikes or the mountain bikes, is knowledge and things we've wanted to take forward. So the decoupling of the system, the smooth power delivery, but also learning that maybe lots of different ports that you have in there that don't get used, we could cut down on those. So for instance, the SL motor has only 2 plug ports in there. One is for a speed sensor and one is for the main harness. Whereas the other system that we have has multiple ports. Now, some of those ports you might use, you might plug in some lights into those as well. So they're not irrelevant. But on this type of platform, we've figured out other ways you could plug in lights, for instance. So rather than having them at the motor, learning from some of these things and evolving the system. Even though it's different, as we've said, it's not a replacement, it's a as well as.
Cool. Thank you. Andrew, you look
Talk,
poised to
yeah,
ask
I've
a
got,
question.
I've got so
desperate
many
to.
questions.
Get in there.
Talking about plugging in of extra stuff,
Mm.
a guy called Karm Asuta, hello Karm Asuta, can you monitor... I just realised what that meant.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Can you monitor your own power output and link to Garmin or other devices, or do you have to install MTB power pedals, which will come out shortly?
No, there's a very good question. Did everybody get that about monitoring power? I think was the essential culprit there. All the motors, any of our turbos have a torque sensor built into them. Very accurate one, so you've got a power meter as standard in your bottom bracket, best place for it. And that can link either via mission control on the app, or if it's a TCD, so a Turbo Connect display that you can add on aftermarket. If you want to do that thing, you can do it with a Garmin as well. You can connect those to have the same sort of information coming through on, I think, what's known as a fake channel. And with the TCDW, which is the wired version, which is on our active bikes. So you could see your power output all day long. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, I've got another couple of ones as well. A guy called, this isn't actually from the forum, this is things I found on your forum.
Cool.
Not stalkery at all. A guy called Jazz Up It asks, Rob
What?
Hansel, can you tell me what the difference is between the Fazua and the Specialized SL 1.1? Fazua has been around for ages, so not sure what the fuss about is with the Specialized SL motor, as it's basically the same, isn't it? Not to be condescending towards our technology whatsoever.
No, I mean, it's been a while, to be fair, since I've ridden the Fazua motor, and the best way to test things is back to back. But from what I remember, the Fazua motor has a certain kick to it, and as you start spinning and your cadence range increases, the power drops off a little bit. It had a really good battery life, but and when I saw the kind of spec sheet for this just before I rode it, I kind of thought, well, if you look at the numbers, the Fazua has 60 newton meters of torque, and this has 35. So I thought this would feel weaker, but my experience was that this felt a little bit more powerful than the Fazua at the higher cadence range. But I'd like to test back to back. Actually, it might make a good video.
Yeah, maybe that's some more content. Yeah.
Do you want a couple more? I've got blimmin' loads.
Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Can
We've
we
got
get
one
a
over
microphone
here,
for this
Andrew.
gentleman?
Which one? Where we go?
We'll start at the front.
Right here.
So I'm also Robin. Just going back to the last question before, and the waterproofness of the new SL.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it will cope with the British winter perhaps a little bit better than the full fat version?
I think it is poised to do so. I wouldn't say that it's going to be less capable, for sure. There's less complicated parts to it in terms of plugs, so by default, it should be, yeah.
But the TCU is the same, or different?
TCU is the same, yeah, same design.
They said that they'd blasted it with jet washers to test it, and because there was a few of us from the UK, and we did ask that kind of question because we know some people have experienced things being swapped out. They seemed really confident with the motor. The TCU, it's the same, but it looks sealed. I don't know.
Yeah,
if
actually,
that's...
tell a lie. There is a second generation, I believe, which is either coming out soon or is in the works. But it's
TCU.
Yeah, TCU. It looks identical. That's the idea. And it would integrate seamlessly as well. Interesting, the kind of talking point about waterproofing of the motor. It's very rarely water ingress into the motor. Often it's the coming into the frame and it's sitting there in the electronics. So it's having a Gore-Tex membrane inside the new SL motor, the SL 1.1, it is great. The sealing on a Brose 2.1 motor, or indeed our 1.3 motors, is perfectly adequate. It's more often the case where it sits and then the water gets into the frame and then the main harness sits in there as well. So it's not necessarily the sealing of the motor itself, but we do understand the water ingress issues into the frames more so. And this market is particularly sensitive to it, I would say, and we have fed that back through to our Swiss design team. So the idea of these bikes being kind of tested in a dry, dusty Californian scenario is fairly old school. I mean, once upon a time, yeah, that might have been the case, but our centre for e-bike evolution, as it were, is kind of, it's very much in Switzerland. California designed, Swiss engineered is one of the many taglines that we have at Specialized, but that's where our hub for e-bikes goes on, and that's where pretty much everything is happening, Germany and Switzerland.
Is it true they measure chainstay length in Toblerones?
Actually, yeah, we were talking about that yesterday, yeah, and cuckoo clocks. And
it's a good unit.
Swiss cheese, yeah. Can we go any? No, but not.
I've got even more.
Have you?
Yeah,
Have
bet
we
you
got any
have.
more questions
Yeah,
in
is
the
anyone in the
I'm
audience
sure
wants
you
to ask?
guys have got loads of questions here.
We've got two gentlemen right here.
Sorry to do this, but I've got to go back to water ingress. Yeah, I own a 1.3 motor and a 2.1 motor. I've had two in my 1.3 which are proven to be down to water ingress, where I've had my cranks basically seize up. My 2.1 motor is 3 months old. I've had a new TCU, new power cable, and now a new motor. Are you going to go back to Bros and try and get things better? Because I've just chucked $7,000 at this bike. You brought out a new one, which has been said to be IP 67, 68 rated, which is now superseded my 2.1 motor. I can't sell my second-hand old 2018 bike because people are up in arms of these are worthless without warranty.
So the question is, are we going to go back to Bros?
Are you going to go back to Bros? I mean, at the moment,
Absolutely.
I can't do anything with my 2018. It's mine. It's a spare bike. I use it as a spare bike for when my other one breaks down.
Yeah.
If I
Fair
didn't
enough.
have such a great local bike shop, one that we all know,
Yeah.
I can get my bike turned around in a day, 2 at maximum.
Perfect.
But if I was unfortunate, lived up north, and I was dealing like some of the other well-known brands, slightly larger, I've heard stories of 6 weeks of their bike being in the shop without being fixed. Specialized have to look at this. I'm one of these that I
understood.
love the brand. I've stayed with the brand, but I can't keep dealing with these problems. It's unfair on us to spend that sort of money.
Understood, and I appreciate you being still a fan of the brand. Certainly some of the earlier setups, so you're talking about the crank seizing up, for instance, that sounds possibly more like bottom bracket and bearing scenario within the motor. So the motor itself, when there's a bottom bracket issue, has to be replaced, even though technically the electronics inside or the belt inside is fine. It's more of the BB scenario. Very early systems, so there was a 1.1 motor in the Gen 1 Livo, did tend to suffer from that. Certainly, again, our idea for supporting riders, every one of you, is to have our shops trained and in the understanding that they should have the right parts in stock, which we supply to them, so that they can turn around bikes as quickly as possible. Ideally, many of them would be in a day. That's really the goal for pretty much all of our turbo retailers, but it has been a very steep learning curve. Certainly, we are very much in contact with Brose. Yeah, it's not a case of now we've got the 1.1, we'd forget what we had before. As I said, it's not a replacement. It very much sits alongside. So we constantly work with them. Same thing with Rosenberger, the plug supplier for the turbo system as well. I mean, you probably have seen on the SL, it doesn't use the same main harness setup, doesn't use the same plug port either. It's a totally different plug. It's a different voltage system as well. So whilst this is new, it's an alternative. We cannot and we will not step away from the ones that we already have in the market. That system is 2019 Livo when it first came out, Gen 2. So it's still fairly new, and we will continue to make sure there is support out there for it and work with Brose, whether it's with the motor itself, whether it's working with Rosenberger and the plugs, Brose's main harness. We're very much in contact with them, and we have people even in this building who feed back the information to them. But thank you very much for the question.
When we run out of warranty on our motors, will you enable us to buy a motor off the shelf?
Yes.
And once we buy that motor, as it's a brand new component, will we get a full 2 years warranty on that new motor?
What we will do, and it's actually available to see on specialized.com now, so on our B2C website, there's a policy known as assisted purchase. Often it used to be called crash replacement, but that's a little bit negative. And it was often considered for frames, for helmets, the sort of things, wheels that can fall foul. But with this new generation of bicycles that involve motors, batteries, etc., we do operate that same policy. So there's a sliding scale on age of product. So as it ages out of its 2 years warranty, you're then within 5 years of sliding scale of percentage of how much you would pay to buy a whole new motor off the shelf. So I think it's 25, 20, maybe 15% off retail, or it could be 30, 25, 20, but there, it is on specialized.com, broken down within the warranty policies, because it's a global brand, so it's offered to everyone, but you might be interested to know that policy was largely built here. The UK does drive quite a lot of it.
It's great to know, but I can ride around on a 1990 stump jumper and I can still get every part for it. But if my 2020 Kinivo is now 2020-30, I'm now out of rider care, crash replacement, and I'm paying full price for a motor. What sort of prices are we looking at when we get to full price?
I don't believe I have a retail price on our motors currently. It's pretty much the only product we don't have a full retail price for, or a suggested.
I can then get an
price.
assisted 1.3 for about £400. That's great while it's assisted, but if it gets to £1,000, it doesn't become a replacement part. The bike then becomes worthless.
Yeah.
And I don't want a bike in 10 years' time being worthless.
Yeah, I can't imagine it would be worthless. I think to your point about the 1990 stump jumper, I'm sure you can get some new old stock that would still fit that. We would probably say that a lot of things from a technology standpoint move on, and if there are things which no longer fit, then we would work on that process with you.
Okay, I'll pass this mic over to somebody else.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers. There was a chap just here, Andy. Thank you.
So what's coming next year for the Livo? Can you tell me?
I was waiting for that one.
It's just behind that curtain, isn't
yeah.
it? There's a few questions online about that I've just seen as well.
As in what's coming new?
Yeah, like, is there going to be a longer travel version, a longer version? So there's quite a few people asking a similar question. Big reveal?
Possibly not from my keeping job perspective. Is it something? Is it something we're going to continue to progress with? Absolutely. The future for Specialized is turbo. Now we've got turbo full fat and we've got turbo SL. Both of them are within our future. So will we see an expansion of the SL range? Absolutely. Will it be next year? I'm not 100% sure. Will we see more bikes this year? Pretty likely.
How long before we see them merge? So one platform with a smaller form factor with the motor power and the battery range.
Oh, now that's the kind of the $64 million question. It's very much like that golden ticket, the full power with the weight of the SL, as it were. We're working on it.
So is the turbo lineup represents quite a significant part of your business, I guess? When do you think that crossover will be? Like, will we still be riding regular powered bikes in 10 years, for example, or do you think that that's going to be more niche?
I would say, and this is partly my own thinking, it's not specifically what Specialized would talk about, but the way our country, the way our market works and the way we're seeing things, buying trends, etc., is that we may end up in a position where acoustic, if you like, or analog bikes really just operate in a niche of, say, UCI events, whether it's road racing, downhill racing, cross-country racing, pretty much every other format of bicycle that we know of at the moment will come with a motor version, or the motor version will completely supersede the acoustic setup. at some point. And that could be, within 10 years. That would not surprise me at all. I mean, the growth, again, maybe a little controversial given the MTB element of the group around us, is really in active bikes. We're all riders here, but the people who aren't yet getting onto bikes is where the opportunity is. And whether that's for health reasons, whether that's eco reasons, whether that's there's too many cars on my way to work reasons, all the simple stuff that we all sit there just like, damn, I'm in the same traffic jam again. There's a way around that, and that's getting out on the bike. So definitely expanding with Turbo. There will be more SL platforms. I don't know what's coming next year for Livo specifically. But thank you for the question.
Have we got a question here, actually?
We do have a question in the audience.
Hello, I'm Steve. I've got a 2019 Livo. I've got a 500 watt battery. I'm just under 100 kilos. I ride in the Surrey Hills. It lasts about 2.5 hours. I'd like to have longer rides.
Right.
A 700 watt battery is just under £1,000. It's a lot of money. Is there a way, or if anyone knows, of how I can upgrade or sell my 500? Okay, there's eBay. Does Specialized support people like me, or will there be sort of Chinese generic versions coming through, and have you got trademarks and protection on things like that?
Is that, what bike is it? Is it
It's the Livo Comp Expert 500 battery.
And can you get a 700?
Not the Expert, sorry, it's the Comp.
Is that the one that you can put a 700 battery into?
I could do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's
So
just
it's a
under
Gen
£1,000,
2, Gen 2 Levo, yeah. So the aperture, the size of the battery is actually identical. Yeah, so in theory you could put a 700 watt hour in there.
Yeah, which I'd like to do.
Or depending on where you're riding, you could have a second 500. I'm not saying either of those things are a cheap option. Currently there isn't a sort of a Part X format.
Okay.
It doesn't exist.
It would be good to see.
Could be interesting
that,
though,
actually,
yeah.
because I was talking to somebody on the way, and they said they've got two 500 watt batteries, and they've had them for a few years, and batteries do degrade over use. But
True.
It would be good to see an option where a rider can give the battery back, it gets recycled, and then they can get a reduced rate option.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, you could do something similar to assisted purchase from that perspective. What would be quite nice, though, actually, is because with mission control you can diagnose the battery health, that there would be a way, maybe like a sliding scale, that depending on the battery health, you can then equate that to a value, either from a selling on perspective or from a part exchange perspective, offset that against the price of a 700. I mean, these are the kind of questions that are great to highlight, because it's, from us, we are delivering to retail. And chances are there may be some retailers out there who do already operate that kind of program, but there's nothing official. You mentioned eBay, and other selling sites are available. But that same kind of thing probably goes on there, but not necessarily the easiest or the most efficient way of doing it, particularly shipping them, of course. Which, as we all know, to safely ship a battery, you have to do it in specific boxes with specific paperwork. So that doesn't want to start happening, and that's possibly why. But almost like a trade-in centre kind of idea. That's quite cool. I like that, Steve. Thank you.
But also the generic versions, everything has Chinese generics eventually. Are you protected against things like that, or will there be someone coming in with a £200, 700 watt battery replacement?
I would say a little bit like some of the aftermarket range extenders, which you put into the bikes. They're not supported by Specialized warranty system.
Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Good afternoon, Jay here.
Hey, Jay.
I just wanted to ask, is the future bigger batteries or more efficient motors?
Could be both.
I noted in Rob's video that the latest Livo SL has a more efficient motor.
It was interesting because when John and I, John had the Livo with the 700 watt battery, and I was riding the SL with the 320 watt battery.
320, yeah.
And we both kind of rode similar kind of pace. John was carrying about 30 kilos of camera equipment. So
Lucky
we
John.
were a little bit heavier. But He has. There's a few questions actually, John, about your T-shirt. You were in a tight T-shirt today. People want to know.
Downsize.
But we came back with a really similar battery. So the engineering team said it is a 48 volt system. It is more efficient. I probably put more effort in as well, apparently, John. So yeah, more effort required. But it does seem like a more efficient system. It'd be interesting to see a full powered version with a bigger,
like
one of those new motors. Yeah, like an upsized kind of motor. To see how efficient it is.
The other thing, which is an interesting point there, is, I mean, you mentioned larger batteries, Jay, and often that is sort of associated with range, but you can just have a more efficient motor, as we've talked about. You could keep the battery size the same.
Tesla, for instance, their latest Model 3, they put the same motor in the Model S, and it was 10% more efficient.
There you go. So that and that's the newer version, isn't it? The 3 is newer than the S. The other element is the way battery technology is going. I mean, we're using lithium-ion cells packed together into the sort of the battery pack itself, and the technology that's being researched, developed for, I wouldn't just say batteries anymore, but I suppose that's the collective term for it, but fuel cell, if you like, whether it's lithium-ion or another format of fuel. Great to develop the motors to make them more efficient, but the batteries themselves, depending what materials they're made out of, will, I would imagine, scale down. They will get smaller, but for the same amount of power, for instance. Or the same amount of watt hours, or the equivalent. You know, when we've gone from watts to lumens, when we talk about our bike lights, we look for some kind of parity. But if we ended up with something that was that size, but it was, say, a 1,000 watt hour equivalent, you know, that would be a huge gain. At some point, there will be a scaling down to probably even smaller, but the same size of battery in the same range. Thank you very much. We've got some gentlemen at the back there. We've got one in the middle as well. Either or.
While on the subject of batteries, I was just wondering, what's the chances of a range extender on the SL going to the Livo and the Kinivo?
There's a few people ask that same kind of thing online as well.
Yeah. So there isn't one currently. It's an interesting point. When we first saw the SL system for Creo, quite a few of us asked the very same question, and Marco, who you know well, one of our product managers in Switzerland, said, well, yeah, it exists. It's called 700 watt hour. But I mean, that's classic Marco to suggest something like that. Would you want to go bigger than that? It then becomes a really heavy bike. And then, of course, it starts draining the power a bit more. It's not designed for it. It's not set up for it. There's no routing for it. Perhaps a Gen 3, maybe. I mean, if that was something you were interested in, and there were plenty of people who said, still want full power, big battery, I want the possibility to add even more range, rather than dropping the battery out and putting in a new one, either a 5 or a 700, could we add a range extender to that? I mean, if you took the existing range extender, 160 watt hours, and you attached it to a full power Livo 2.1, it would drain it pretty quick. That's the problem with just having a range extender on a really it's like putting a tiny fuel tank on a V8 engine, that kind of thing. Versus if you imagine this is much more like a GTI, if you like, that kind of thing. So it can afford to have a smaller fuel tank.
There are quite a few bike brands coming out with the double battery options now, aren't there?
There are, yeah.
Frame mounted.
That I've seen quite a few on the sort of German trekking style of bikes. Even a lot of full suspension active bikes as well seems to be quite popular. We've talked to a few retailers who take this bike, or maybe the kind of the full power version of it, and they're putting slick tyres on, and people are riding them around town, which may seem incongruous to the likes of mountain bikers, but it's a thing. It's out there. It's maybe not the trend we all foresaw, but yeah, putting slicks on the full suspension powered mountain bike makes it a very comfortable ride. Probably a little overkill, but who are we to say? Thank you for your question. Chaps at the back, and then we'll come to Dave at the front here.
Hi, with the evolution of the electric bike being so quick now, do you think the Kinivo and the Livo will stay as staples of the brand, like the stump jumper and the rock hopper, or will there be a constant evolution of each product?
Great question. Constant evolution, I would say, is definitely the case. They certainly won't drop away. Just like we wouldn't say Libo is now obsolete, for instance, with the introduction of Livo SL. If, for instance, thinking out there, if there was a long travel lightweight version, would that mean existing Kinivo is dead? Absolutely not. I mean, that bike, for instance, a lot of the benefits of that bike is the sort of the burliness of it, the way it's been built to handle the terrain. So lightweight is fantastic on a trail bike, on a gravity bike. Sometimes it could be beneficial to still maintain that sort of burliness, that capable, sort of untamed rawness, rowdiness, I think some people term it. Is that still a thing? So yeah, constant evolution on all products, whether they're full turbo or they're SL, for sure. Thank you. I think next door, you had a question as well? Lovely.
Yeah. Hi. It's sort of a need, really, in a way. At my age, we're suddenly finding 24, 25 kilos lifting over stiles and over gates is probably getting a little too much. All the riding we do, we log on our bikes, are in that 300 to 400 watt range. And we're averaging around about 325 watts sort of over a ride. Now, you guys are at 240 or so. If you went from 48 to 52 volts, you'd be smacking that 300 watt range. Why didn't you go straight to 52 volts?
That is exactly one of those questions that I am not equipped to answer. Let me just defer. Adam, do you have an answer for that? Or is it just a case of we've changed from 42 to 48 and that's it?
Not really, nothing that I can sort of...
Yeah. So we don't really have an answer. The engineering team, they may have considered it. They may have looked at it. Perhaps they would have wondered if there was something to support that voltage out there. That's enough other manufacturers utilising these sort of components. Because our system, it's a specialised system, right? But we have a different supplier for the TCU to the battery to the motor. So it may have been thought about, but perhaps we weren't able to get all of the things to play nicely together. That's all I can think of, but I know it's not really the answer to your question. I apologise for not knowing enough about voltage. If one of our engineers were here, they could probably tell you the whys and wherefores.
It's a game of maths against how many more cells you need, how much space you have.
Less cells with a higher voltage, basically.
Yeah, certainly we have the less space scenario going on, so that maybe was the point. But very good question, thank you. We had Dave at the front here.
So I don't have a mic, I'll shout, you know, I'm like...
True, as long as everyone can hear you. Oh no.
The question I have is Levo US, cut-off speeds 30 kilometres an hour, Levo UK 25. Specialized getting involved with the legislation around cut-off speeds in Europe. Are you guys actively involved in that? Because it'd be kind of nice to see what changes you guys were making to be part of that. I was at a symposium this week in Brussels around EPAC and Speedelecs about cut-off speeds. So there's a lot of talk about moving those bars about. We talk about being off-road privately versus speed. I mean, 25k an hour cut-off for me is not really kind of enough. So what Specialized thoughts on that?
Did you see any of our colleagues there? First question back to you. If you were in Brussels, I don't quite make the cut for being invited to those kind of shindigs. However,
I can get you in, don't worry.
Oh, thank you. You're too kind. I would definitely say that from a local perspective, a national perspective, yeah, we are part of the bicycle association, so we do work with their team. We do look at the kind of the lobbying element from a legislation perspective. Certainly, from my own personal view, I would like to see it a little bit faster. The 30 Ks or 20 miles an hour would be great. I think that would serve quite a lot of riders. It would mean that some of them might find it's still quite quick. I mean, we are riders, and to us, 25 Ks an hour doesn't seem like a lot. There are situations where people do get onto the bikes, depending on which brand of motor it is or system, depending on what the acceleration response is. There is that slight element of some people who aren't used to this instant power surge, which some systems provide, finding it all a bit too much. And if that was to accelerate straight up to top speed, it could be a little bit jarring for them. However, from a performance riding perspective, I'd like to see it to be raised, the assistance level. As we know, we work within the confines of what the government suggests is safe and their regulations, and that's, we're to the letter, as it were. But outside of that, if we can afford to help change the letter, then we're all going to benefit from it.
I can just enlighten you a little bit. The DVLA in the UK doesn't actually understand. So you could actually phone the DVLA at the same time I could, and you'd get two representatives. And one would say you don't have to register a bike that's over 25k now, and the other one would say you have to. So there's confusion even within our government policy regarding EPAC and speed pedelec bikes at the moment.
I think they've had bigger things on their plate lately, haven't they?
Can you get a ticket for like 75 of us to go to Brussels, and we'll all go and talk about it?
I think there was another there was an article I read recently that was about changing to an Spedelec, so that different qualification of e-bike, and working with the DVLA, and there was a amount of hours that it took to do it, and the amount of cost there was as well. And I think it was something in the region of about £200, and it would take you about 4 hours to do. But the amount of things you'd have to change to an active bike or a road bike to make it legal is one thing, and then it would be definitely make our beautiful looking lightweight mountain bikes look slightly incongruous to make them S-pedelecs and therefore officially legal to go over the assisted speed limit of 25 k's an hour.
Timo online has just said, interestingly, just today I watched a video from the US where someone demanded lowering their EMTB speed to 15 miles an hour. So
wow,
maybe theirs was too fast.
Maybe we can ship them some of our bikes.
Yeah. We'll swap.
Yeah, rule 5.
And Pete Beers saying, whatever speed it is restricted to, you will always want to go faster.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's an interesting one. I guess for many riders who can physically go that much faster anyway, it does seem like we're getting a little bit shortchanged, and maybe things will change. And to that gentleman's point, perhaps we will always want to go that much faster. We've got some rules to play with.
Cool. Another question?
Just a really quick question on back to the SL and the battery size. Is there room in the frame for a bigger battery, or is the battery that's in there maxing out that space?
Pretty much, yeah. We on the carbon frames, which are S-Works, Expert, and Comp Carbon, of which is a full carbon chassis, so rear end as well as front end. They go from a size small right the way through up to XXL. There's an alloy frame bike though, which goes to an extra small, and that's very, very small, so we have to base our battery capacity on that first and foremost. There's only so much volume, but hence range extender or extenders if you are looking at a Founders Edition. Founders Edition, does everyone know about that? There's a few quizzical looks, yeah, just so you know. S-Works, where we take it to the limit, we went one step more. Okay, there's something called the Founders Edition, which if you haven't seen it, it's got an even more wild paint job. It has a full axis group set on there. When I say full axis group set, it's a rear mech and a shifter. And then it has some gold decals, and you get 2 range extenders with it. So that's an opportunity. Should you be interested, contact your local retailer and you register your interest there. 250 worldwide.
Doesn't everyone get to take one home today?
Yeah, that's right, Rob. Actually, yeah. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. That's part of the door charge, though. It's like 12,500.
I've got a plastic token.
We've got that. Good, yeah, plastic token. Can we get a mic on our man at the back there?
Just really alongside the last question, is there a plan to bring any Troy Lee additions to the SL or the new Kinivo or anything? Just we've seen them previously, but there doesn't seem on any of the new Evolution of bikes to be any special edition other than the sort of Founders Edition you were just speaking of.
Good question. Would you like to see that then?
Love a Troy Lee one. They're like hen's teeth.
Love a Troy Lee. Well, certainly it's one of those cool brands, isn't it? And a great collaboration. I would imagine the team in Morgan Hill, because they're closer to Troy Lee's home as well, might have something to deal with.
But there's nothing you know of in the pipeline?
Not currently. Not on the cards. Chances are, a little bit like Founders, it would be limited, and it would be a point to take a drop of X amount of units and bring them into the UK. So it's always possible that it will happen. We'll just be informed. Do you want in? By the sounds of things, we'll say yes, and then it will be put into the marketplace via our retail network. But yeah, Nice question. Thank you. We've got one just here for this chap. This gentleman.
I was going to say, other than the bike retailers, of which there's really not that many of them these days, are there any opportunities this year that you're offering for people to try out the SL, bike parks and places like that?
Absolutely, yeah. Boom. Brilliant question. You may have seen the turbo van out the front of the building. So that's operated, that's run by my colleague Adam, and he is where? He's at the back. Oh no, he's gone to the loo. That's fine. That's fine. Call of nature. So Adam is he's going to locations across the country, bike parks, to allow for what we call a turbo ride experience that we will create an invite for. You get the link, you sign up via the link on a web page, and then you can book out a morning or an afternoon ride, and then you can try the bike for real.
Cool.
Yes, actually, yeah, we have there's a demo fleet operated at Cody Brennan. One of our retailers there has Libo SLs already. There will be more into the market because more retailers will want them as test bikes anyway. But as a specialised branded event, I think we have 6 locations. We were going to be at Spedelec tomorrow, but the weather conditions have caused us to... Spedelec won't be there, yeah, exactly. Sorry, we apologise, but that was going to be one of the things to say. But otherwise, yeah, we have various locations in Wales, in the Midlands, in the southwest, in the southeast, up north as well, in Scotland, that you'll be able to try the bike.
Just aligned with that, Trail Days was fantastic last year, and the Libos were super popular. You may not be able to talk about it, but could we see that again this year?
Trail Days.
What a question.
No, didn't we put out a post? Actually?
Yeah, we put out a post a couple of months ago now. It will not be happening this year, unfortunately. But there is scope for the future. That's all I can say.
Yeah, we're taking a year off. Think about it like Glastonbury.
Like Glastonbury, yeah.
Yeah.
Letting the land settle.
Exactly. Yeah.
I've got loads more questions online.
Go on.
All mounting on the talk of trying out Libo SLs.
Yep.
Anyone know where I can get a test on an XL one?
On an extra large?
Yep.
I've got one.
You got one?
Yeah.
Okay.
See Rob?
Come and see me. Spedelec most Wednesdays.
But can you go to local retailers and try them? Instead of going to...
You can go to local retailers to try them. Whether they've chosen to buy in an extra large is another matter. Typically, they'll go for something like a large. Some will invest in the full fleet. I mean, at Cody Brennan, do we know what they've got there? Maybe medium and large, I suppose. Medium and large. But extra large, in the very, very near future, they will be in our dealer test fleet. So a retailer, whoever this person's nearest retailer is...
There's a guy at the back.
It's a guy at the back, is
Yep.
it? Oh, okay. You can go to your retailer, you can ask to borrow the bike, they will then ask us, we will ship them the bike, you then borrow it from them. So yeah, and that's a full size range.
When will that be, do you know?
Matt, do you know when that will be? When have we got bikes in DTF?
They're built.
They're built?
They need to go live on the site.
Very soon then.
It's more down to sales, organising themselves. When they flick the switch, they'll be on. But probably not that long.
So it's all about the IT at the moment, but the bikes are in the building. Sorry, maybe that was a bad idea to mention that. There's way more of you than there are of us. Please don't steal our bikes.
Type that 700 watt battery.
Great stuff. Anything else?
Reggie Bong asks, will there be a Kinivo SL?
Would you like to see a Kinivo SL, or is that just a question that's kind of out there?
I'm just reading off. I'm not actually Reggie Bong, so I can't comment on that. So.
I'm assuming there's a hopeful kind of leading element to that. So perhaps.
Reggie Bong, let us know if you would like to, and anyone else in the chat, let us know if you'd like to see a Kinivo SL.
Great. The more of those sort of thumbs up and yes, we'd like to see this, the more we can tell people in Switzerland that this might be a good idea to start thinking about it. I'd be surprised if they aren't thinking about it, but
yeah,
if they aren't, we can tell them EMTB Forum said that's where it's at.
Okay.
Yep.
I've got one from Squire Ryder here, who was actually from the EMTB forums. I remain a bit sceptical about the claims that the Livo SL can go as far as the Turbo Livo, but I would totally use the low power eco and trail modes. On my existing bike, I always feel I need a lower support mode for my day-long rides. I also note that the claims that the motor is 80% efficient, and that sounds good, but how does it compare to the Bros or Pro Z?
Well, in terms of the range, range is so difficult because
so many factors.
There's so many factors, but I can only give you my experience. I haven't ridden the bike extensively. We did 3-4 kind of full days on it, but in terms of the range, we were equaling each other, like I mentioned earlier. So my experience is it is similar, but I think the rider of the SL is going to have to put in a little bit more effort because the assistance you get is a bit lower. So it's close. I don't think you will go out riding with another rider on a Livo and be really outclassed in terms of battery, but I think you'll be putting in a lot more effort to kind of keep up with that rider.
I'd say the other thing just to consider for everyone here is that simply looking at watt hours is not going to equal your range. So there's the efficiency of the motor, there's whether John's with you and he's carrying a massive pack of stuff, or Rob's just running the normal sort of riding gear. There's also tyres, the weight of your wheels, how muddy they are, backpacks, body armour, all of this stuff, tyre pressures, suspension pressures, all of these things, as well as then factoring in your support mode and your peak power. So, I mean, the beauty of Mission Control is that you can adjust both of those things. If you're ever concerned about your overall range on a ride, you can use Smart Control, which is built into the Mission Control app. There you can set your duration of a ride, you can set your distance of a ride, so either one, not both, but one or the other. You can even set elevation now as well. You can set heart rate now as well, and it can work to the parameters you put in. So it's really worthwhile to consider it that way. I mean, yes, of course, in theory, your range is probably limitless on an SL because once you're out of juice, it's not actually a heavy bike. I mean, this is around sort of 16.9, I think we said, when it's running tubeless for an S-Works, but even an alloy, comp alloy, is only about as much as 19.5. So when they're not powered, you're still riding a relatively lightweight mountain bike. Back in, even as recent as maybe a decade ago, that was quite light for an enduro bike, 150mm travel enduro bike of the day. So it's not too difficult to ride SL platforms without any assistance.
There's quite a few people asking about upcoming bikes.
Oh.
Can you ask if an XC bike with a Creo motor is in your plans? A few people mentioning a Kinivo SL as well. So I would buy a Kinivo SL, an Enduro SL. Lots of interest in a super light Kinivo or a super light XC bike.
A super light XC bike, yeah. I mean, that's an interesting one because, of course, we talked earlier about how we've got performance riders, whether they're XC, whether they're downhill, whether they're triathletes, using e-bikes to train on. I think it was last year it was the first UCI sanctioned e-mountain bike race as well. And it was all done pretty much on trail bikes because that's what's out there. But you could see in time that also becoming slightly more XC orientated, and therefore the lightweight being a key factor, and almost a bit like some other areas of motorsport, I suppose you could say. There could be just as much advancement in the product as there is in the sort of the operator of the product, be it the driver or the rider. So it's a consideration. Lightweight XC with a motor, interesting idea. I mean, XC in our market here isn't the biggest segment that we operate within. I mean, trail is definitely probably the obvious one. But as turbo as a category grows, then yeah, we will start to see the other experiences become motorized. So could it happen? Yes, another tick for Kinivo SL there as well, I think. So.
Cool. Anything else on the chat?
I got G Smith, and it's also been asked quite a lot on the forum as well. What is the weight of the alloy model? Do you know, or is that a really bad question to ask?
I said it a moment ago, it's about 19.5 kgs. Yeah, for the alloy. So the comp alloy, 19.5. Difference between that and the comp carbon is approximately a kilo. So it's about 18.5. Expert is about 18, and then S-Works is approximately 17.3. These are all out of the boxes as well, so you can take your tubes out. You could cush cool them or whatever whatever wants to be done. But that's approximate weight range. Pretty cool. Anything else?
Where's the beer?
Yeah. I was going to say the lunch token's burning a hole in your pocket now. Sorry, we've got Steve here.
Me again, sorry. But thank you. Just looking around everybody, there's quite a few grey hairs here, me included. I'm not
some no hairs
being
as well.
to anyone. I think it's just interesting who's here, who's been attracted to the day, and thanks for the invite, by the way. I think it's been really good.
Appreciate it.
From a marketing perspective, obviously, Specialized involved in acoustic bikes as well as e-bikes. I can see e-bikes becoming more and more and more popular, but you've attracted people here of a certain age.
Yep.
Have you got any marketing plans on how you could reach a younger rider?
Bring the price down. Half price.
Good point.
The price is a big barrier to entry. I think when I'm riding, a lot of young riders look at an e-bike and think it's so cool. Like, I really want an e-bike, but the barrier to entry is pretty high. You know, we're talking from, what's the cheapest, 5,000 up
5,000,
to
yeah.
the Founders, which is £27.5
million.
So
no, it's 12.5. Just so you know, 12,500. But yeah, we joke.
So
you're right.
The barrier to entry, I think, for these young riders is the price, and it would be amazing. Even talking about the frame-only option, you know, maybe that would lower that barrier to entry to a lot of younger riders. So,
it's a worthwhile consideration, and I would say, as we've seen over the years, with the development of key technologies, it's very rare that it happens at the bottom and goes up. Right? It has pretty much every time. It's a technological advancement. It's top down. And over the years, they have come down. I mean, for instance, as an example, we launched Creo last year with an S-Works and an Expert. We now have a Comp Carbon. We now have a Comp Alloy. Now, I know we're still talking in the thousands of pounds here, and I don't want to sort of overlook that. But our sort of long vision is, if there's going to be platforms that all have a motor and a battery in one format or another, then yeah, the price point has to come down, and to lower that barrier to entry, make it much more of the enabler that cycling in general is, but e-cycling even more so. But great question. We are working on it for sure. There is a whole host of marketing going on for that.
I've one last small, you know, on the TCU with the LED lights that light up 1 bar for every 10%.
Yes, yeah.
That sometimes when I'm near the end of my battery, which is another 500 watt pointer there, is it would be really nice to have the digital readout of, I don't know, 89%, 81%, rather than wondering whether that 2 bar is 21% or 29%.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to read.
Yeah.
Actually, John's got a Garmin, and he uses, I think, is it like a fake channel or something?
It's a fake channel, yeah.
And it sends the exact percentage, and it's really helpful.
Yes.
Or even our TCD would do that. It's nowhere near as cool as a Garmin because it doesn't have GPS, but it will give you percentiles of battery life, or indeed mission control. But that, of course, would mean taking your phone out and checking it. But we refer to it as a display. I mean, it's rudimentary, but it does operate the bike as well as give you a state of charge. But ideally, a percentage would be nice, right?
Yeah, I've run out twice at the bottom of a massive hill, and it's not nice pushing back.
That sucks. Sorry.
Solve his problem.
Yes, yeah, it would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a TCD would solve that.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
Another one at the back.
There's always that slight thing with mountain bikes, though, isn't there, about whether you have a display on your handlebars? I mean, just anybody displays on handlebars?
No.
Yeah. Okay. A few handful. Okay. Fair enough. I think that's reasonably proportionate. Yeah, rather than forcing you to have it.
Another question.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Sorry.
Just a quick one in relation to your last answer. You were saying obviously £12,500 is the top end model.
Yeah.
Is, by Specialized as a brand, is any notice paid to the used market, and does that then dictate the release dates of future models, sort of in like a car sense, or because obviously the value being so high, a couple of years later it can still be worth a lot to someone?
Interesting question, because we've been having discussions about that in terms of the sort of the after sales. And where that leaves second-hand product, and it is kind of a melee at the moment, almost like with the battery scenario and the trade-in. We don't specifically, I mean, if a product is not ready, then we won't be launching it. That's one take on things. We used to always work to a launch cycle. Everything came out in sort of September 1 every year, or even June, even further past that. Nowadays, pretty much when a product is ready to go, we will launch it. So ideally, it will come out as soon as it's ready with stock. That's nice, wherever that is. But to your point, I don't think we've considered what will be in the marketplace at the time. But we certainly don't want to be launching stuff straight after something else, so that it becomes obsolete. There's no kind of planned obsolescence for that. Right here. Just this gentleman right here. Thanks. Sorry, yeah, you were turning around at the time.
Yeah, just on from that, with these bikes being close to the price of a second-hand car and obviously getting more and more popular, I'm sure there are people like myself would, that I've got a 2019 Livo, but I would like to get the new SL. Would it be something for Specialized to think about some sort of part exchange or some sort of way of being able to sell an approved used bike that would give people the...
Approved used, I like that term.
Yeah, pre-used. to give people the, people that can't afford perhaps a new one, to let them have the experience of owning a new mountain bike.
Some stores do it, I think. Like, I know Chris at Berkshire Cycles doesn't do it all the time, but if he can make it work and he knows there's somebody that wants to buy.
Yeah, I mean, great. Yeah, I've seen
I know
that.
I've
seen that, but yeah, from a national
area.
point of view, to try and get more people being able to afford an e-mountain bike, having that approved, pre-loved, Specialized stamp on it would mean a lot, I think, for people parting with their cash.
It is a great idea. You know what, that kind of leads into some of the service requirements that many of our retailers either adhere to or go beyond already. I mean, we mentioned one just then. I know, for instance, Raceco do a huge amount of part exchanges that come in and kind of recycle them, as it were. And it does work that way, almost like a gateway bike for those who are not too sure yet and wouldn't have wanted to outlay maybe £5,000, £7,000, £8,000. They might be more applicable to sort of 2 or 3, and then once they really get the buzz for it, they'll then start the upgrade process. I think now we're getting to that point where there've been enough in the market that there are starting to be the kind of changes over. People are on their second, maybe third platforms, and so they are looking for that second-hand market. To your point, there is nothing official. But I like the concept of approved used. We're pretty much working with retailers who offer something is great, and that's off their own back. But if we were able to provide them with as you quite rightly say, sort of a stamp of approval, that's a worthwhile consideration. That's something for us to look into. Andy, we've got a chap here. Unless you've got something you want online.
Are we going to see you guys racing the new SL at the EWS this year?
Georgia Leslie, are you going to be racing? You have competed in EWS before.
I have no idea. I'll have to wait and see. But I certainly won't be racing.
Oh, come on, you'd smoke them.
Why not?
Will they be racing it? I don't know for sure whether it'll be SL or whether they would be full fat. I would imagine, like with a lot of our athletes, they'd be given the opportunity. So, say the UCI teams, depending on the terrain, they might ride Avenge that day, or a tarmac that day, or Roubaix, for instance. So, if they were given the opportunity to choose, they might favour this for that particular course. Yeah, I don't know for sure though. I'm not in it. Not in S racing.
We asked Toby, what are you going to ride?
Oh yeah. Maybe Libo, just standard Libo.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because you would think the Livo would be quicker on the transitions and the up stages because there are going to be some technical climbs, but maybe this would be faster going down. So
I think that would accelerate past the 15. You see what I mean? When you're on a normal bike, hit 15.
So this will be easier to pedal over 15, yeah.
Because I think that is going to accelerate on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you've got a long traverse. So yeah, time will tell. There'll be some testing done before.
No doubt.
First round,
Yeah.
Cool. Have we got any more from online?
Yeah, we've got a couple more. Andrew Price asks, are you sticking with Brose for the 2021 full power Livo?
Yes, we are.
Okay. No? Okay.
To the point?
Yeah, quick to the point, no thank you. Oh, we've got another question in the audience. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Cheers. I'm an analog rider at the moment, so thinking of switching to e-bikes. But I'm worried about my data. Is there a way to switch off the data being sent to Specialized HQ on the Mission Control app?
There's a lot of people that actually share your concern as well. On the forum, when people learned that Mission Control, I think when you connect to it, it may send some data of your rides over. I think that's quite with privacy and
fair, yeah.
You know, things looking at where you're located. How private is Mission Control, and can users just request to maybe use some of the benefits of Mission Control, like the heart rate monitor, but not share their locations and their ride data?
That's a very good question. I mean, certainly from a personal information data, absolutely none of that gets shared from one perspective. From the ride data, though, I mean, part of the ride data is learning to develop new product.
But it'd be good to be able to opt out of that if you wanted to.
True. David, is there an opt-out? Not currently. Okay, so there isn't one currently. I definitely wouldn't want people to be discouraged from using Mission Control, considering all the benefits it can provide. It is only tracking the ride data. To be 100% clear, it's not tracking your personal data. You could choose not to upload to Strava, for instance, so that it doesn't show where you live, but otherwise it's part of understanding how riders use their bikes will help us develop not just new product, but also a service culture as well, so that you would know now's the time to get my bike serviced. Now's the time to have a brake bleed. Now's the time to look at the drivetrain. Now's the time, you know, that kind of thing. The more we can understand how you use the bikes, the more we can suggest sort of preemptive servicing rather than you roll your bike into a store. This is a problem. Can I get it fixed? In advance, a bit like your car or motorbike, that kind of thing. The automotive industry does have this way of alerting you. And I don't know what you're like, but when I need to have my car serviced, I'll get emailed, texted, and phone called until I book a service. And at the time you think it's annoying, but then after you've had the car done, it's peace of mind, and you know that your product is then like ideal for the winter or what have you.
Does it still collect the data if you don't use Mission Control? So
No.
Okay.
No, because there's no way of pushing it to us if you're not using Mission Control.
Okay.
To my knowledge. Yeah. I don't think we're. Yeah, David, right here. If you can just explain that a little bit.
Okay. So, firstly, it would be useful to know what data you're concerned about us having, because then we can try and answer that question specifically. What stays on the bike is anything that's kind of been abnormal, so fault codes, temperatures over, voltage under, that kind of stuff, like you'd expect on a car. So we're primarily trying to do this to help and help retailers, help riders to ride better and have less downtime. That's the core rationale behind this. Mission Control, if you go to the current version when you're paired with the bike and you go to diagnose and you go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see advanced diagnose, and you can choose to upload your full bike log if you want. And typically what's going to happen is, hopefully you don't, but let's say you had a problem and you're miles from somewhere and you ring your retailer and they say, could you just go to Mission Control and send us your error log, and then we can have a look remotely and see what you need.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that we're focused on and we're trying to help with. We don't want to know where you are. It's of no interest or help to us. Happy to take that personally afterwards if you've got particular questions.
Thank you. Cheers. I've got a gent right here.
Hi, just carrying on from the data that Specialized used, did that bias the decision to go with the SL? Do they go down to the kind of detail that we could look at in our Strava and go, I only used 10% for, I only used turbo for 10% of my ride. I could quite happily run an SL.
I would have said
and
from
other
a...
riders would be always on turbo.
from a product development standpoint, at that stage, whilst we would use a lot of mission controls data to help inform us, more of the production of SL system was going to be anecdotal feedback and responses from riders like ourselves, people in the business as well, suggesting that they don't need the power. And really, the idea of SL, it came about probably at least 3 or 4 years ago, if not longer, to try and make it lighter. It's just that the tech wasn't there, partly because we wanted to use our own design when we first got into e-bikes. And we've evolved since then, but when we first got into e-bikes, we've partnered with a great motor manufacturer with Brose. We were with a rear wheel manufacturer on our very first active bike, so we have gone through different things. With the SL system, we were able to get to a point where we had our design manufactured for us. So not just specialized firmware in a branded motor, but the entire thing is our design. So it's going to constantly evolve like that, but mission control would help with any of the data and product evolution, sure.
Yeah, if that data was available to individual people, you could look at your own data from a ride you done this morning and say, I could have done it on the SL. I wouldn't have needed the big battery and the big motor.
True, N+1. Yeah. Thank you. There's a chap right in the middle here.
So would it be possible that you could simulate an SL power-wise on a Livo?
Simulate
in what settings
power.
with the mission control app?
In theory, you could reduce the support and peak power actually, because of course the peak power on this is the same as nominal. You could reduce it right the way down. I don't know what, because it's done on a slider and percentage settings. I'm sure someone could work it out to give you that same feel. I don't know what those settings would be. We could maybe figure that out whilst we're here, or indeed task someone with that. So say it's 20% support and only 50% peak power, for instance, that kind of thing. In theory, it's possible, but you will notice it because it's not a lighter bike.
Yeah, of course, but it'd be interesting you could take your bike out and say this is simulating what I'm going to get, so that would be quite nice.
Yeah, simulating the power, if you then put them both side by side on a flat road, you get the same feeling. Of course, if you then start gradient, then you're working against gravity and the weight of the bike will have a factor to consider, but otherwise, yeah, you can
I
do
reckon
it
it
on a
would be around 35 to 40%. I think when we did
Could be,
a
couldn't
real basic calculation.
Oh, you've already given this a go, have
yeah,
you? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I should have just said to Rob.
Interesting, Rob. Yeah,
I put it in one of the threads in the forum. I geeked out and I tried to work it out, but I think it works out around 40% assistance, and that will give you around 240 watts. That's a real simple kind of guesstimate.
Okay, good.
Cool.
Adam?
I didn't want to be the guy to ask it, but I'm going to be that guy. De-restricted. I guarantee 99% of the population in this room probably de-restricted their Livo at one point, and maybe got back, who knows. With that on the new one, is it going to affect draining the battery or the amount of range you get by having 15.5 take on?
Will it drain the battery by riding the bike faster? Yeah. Yes, it will. Yeah, any de-restriction, or regardless of de-restriction, say you're in the US. So in the US, you have a high speed limit, or speed assistance, should I say. Creo, for example, their road bike goes up to 28 miles an hour assistance. Ours is still 15.5. So totally different laws. Their range is significantly lower than ours. No question. You can't have one without the other. Regardless of how you achieve it, yeah, you will drain the battery quicker if it goes faster.
Levon is here.
Just now you've made the SL, it's your design motor and everything else. If you took a standard full fat Livo versus an SL,
yep,
how can you justify the extra cost of the SL when it realistically is a lower spec? Take the S-Works, for instance. You're coming away from 36 factory forks down to 34 factory forks, which in a retail saving are well over £300. Yet the cost of the SL is 250 quid above across the board.
Yeah, fair question. It is a slight premium on SL over that of full fat, if you like, or turbo. Turbo versus Turbo SL. Turbo SL is a more premium product. We aren't creating the amount of units yet that we are on existing size, so kind of economies of scale wise, the entire unit itself is not going to be as cheap, so we do have cheap, cost effective, so we do have a slight premium on them currently. At some stage, there may indeed create slightly closer parity. We have looked, we have one of my colleagues is dedicated to looking at sort of the price breaks between, say, Stump Jumper, Livo SL, Kinivo, Enduro, so across the entire trail matrix, and to try and work out how closely aligned they are. There's often a lot of things that aren't obvious. I mean, the forks thing, yeah, is massively obvious. Sometimes there's hubs, sometimes it's a dropper post, sometimes it's a stem. But otherwise, yeah, currently they do run out at a premium. That is something that is as it stands, but we're looking to adjust that as we go forward.
I'm assuming the motor costs quite a little bit more to develop because a Bros is more of an off-the-shelf.
Yeah.
You know, it's made already.
Correct.
Versus the motor that you guys have effectively spec'd and had manufactured. So maybe some of that's cost is in that, right?
Yeah. The design cost, the R&D, and then of course the kind of the economies of scale piece as well. But yeah, the 2.1 or the 1.3 has our firmware in it, and we have, because of Brose's increase in volume, mainly due to the life of Gen 1 Livo and Gen 2 and Kinivo, we've been instrumental in the design phase of that 2.1 motor, particularly motor mounting bolts to work with our FSR system appropriately and be in the ideal placement for our bikes. Other brands can still use them, but the way that motor delivers power, if it doesn't have the specialised firmware on it, is quite different. It's not the same effect at all, whereas the SL, being our entire system, does require a bit more outlay to build it in the first place.
Cool. We've got about 3 or 4 more minutes, so has anyone got another question? Have we got any more on the chat, Andrew?
Yeah, we got a few on the chat.
Okay.
Actually, some that have pre-submitted from Jay Brightwater, who runs E-Bike Smile EMTB community. Steve Jones on EMBN said he expects motors to last 40,000 plus miles. Is this what the Brose motors are built for? I don't really know how you can comment on
40,000.
that.
I don't know anybody's put that much on them so far. It's yeah. Put it back out, Steve, whilst he's sunning himself in France.
Okay. Lisa Bennett from the same community asks, can they make their motor casing stronger or have a metal bash guard as standard?
To stop the battery casing getting, yeah, I cracked one of mine actually. The plastic, the bash guard on the bottom.
Yeah. Could we make it in metal? In theory, it could be fabricated in metal. Yeah, the resin that it's made out of is pretty tough, and it's done to account for a global product. So in some markets, of course, we do tend to run them as low to the ground as possible and a little bit more hardcore with them. I don't believe there's a plan to have a metal one at the moment, but again, it's one of those things that, you know, taking feedback is great, and it might be that a product could be developed. As it stands, it would add quite a lot more weight to the bike as well, which, being an SL, is the last thing we want to do. Standard Livo and Kinivo, I can understand why a lot of people want to do that.
Cool.
Yeah, we've only got a couple more minutes.
Well, I was going to say we've got one more for this chap here, and then should we?
Yeah, we're good.
Call it. Yeah.
This new motor manufacturer, have they made or will they be making a full fat motor?
Not currently, no. I mean, our partner for full fat, if you like, as we're calling it, is Brose. Yeah. At the moment, yeah, our partner for this motor has been obviously involved in the fabrication of it, but it's our design, so they haven't really had to have. I mean, I'm sure they've had a lot of input, but there was never a could you also do this, but for a replacement to Brose on the cards. It was always designed to be a totally different proposition. Yeah, great question.
Any more, Andy?
You can end on a really good one if you like.
Go
on. We need the Livo fat bike brought back. Any thoughts?
Livo fat bike. Who would ride a Livo fat bike?
Yeah, give it a go.
There you go.
Would you buy one? Okay.
What about a Founders Edition Livo fat bike?
Oh, now you're talking. Now you're talking, yeah. If they're limited edition around the world to 25, then yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
What about an aggro hardtail?
An aggro hardtail, like a hardcore hardtail, that kind of thing. Prefer that to a full suspension version. It's one for the books. Yeah, currently the trail platform is where it's at and it's all full suspension, but could it be a hardtail trail bike perhaps as well? Yeah, we don't have anything at the moment.
Cool, amazing. Well, if you're watching on the live stream, thank you. There's been some good questions that have come through. And everyone in the audience, thanks for your questions and your participation and coming along today. And I think this is the first time you don't often allow people in here, so it's quite a nice opportunity to come and see the bikes and eat some pizza and drink some beer, which I think...
It's certainly the first time to encourage a forum group as well. I think the last time we had this many riders in here, we had to redecorate afterwards, so go easy on the sherbets afterwards if you don't mind.
Amazing. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers, mate.
Put it there.
Thank you.
Nice one.